Hi everyone, my name is Heron, and today I would like to talk about a bit of a big feeling, or rather, a reaction that many of us have to having big feelings. Today's topic is crying. Now, I think a lot of us have heard sort of these platitudes like, it's okay to cry, but what does that really mean? When is it okay to cry? What if we can't cry? So let's break it down both culturally and scientifically. And first, once again, I'm going to share a bit of a personal anecdote to set the tone and help you understand my perspective on crying. You might be surprised to hear that I don't cry very often. Although when I was a child, some well meaning adults told me it's okay to cry, when I looked around me, that was very often not true. If I cried at school, often the other children would bully me. If I cried at home, sometimes my parents would say mean things to me. So although I heard that it was okay to cry, the reality of it was, it really often wasn't. I learned to be afraid of crying because crying, to me, made me feel less safe. And that sort of a fear being instilled as a child makes it very difficult to overcome later as an adult. So to this day, it's still difficult for me to cry. Now, over the past couple of years, the world has felt so scary that I think a lot of us have been afraid to cry or maybe just felt too overwhelmed. Some days it feels like if we start crying now, we'll simply never stop. There's so much sadness in the world, it's difficult to comprehend. So we develop this baseline of anxiety and sadness that we carry with us day to day. So the other day, I was talking with my therapist, and I decided to tell her the story of Maddie, a little girl who I used to babysit many years ago. Maddie had autism, and she was unable to speak, unable to understand even nonverbal cues like pointing or eye contact. Well, one day, Maddie's mother bought her some gummy bear vitamins. And she was so excited about these gummy bear vitamins, she thought they were candy, and she wanted to eat more and more of them. And her mother tried to explain to her, no, you can only have 2 per day. But of course, Maddie didn't understand how to speak. She didn't understand the words. She just knew that she wanted more gummy bears and she needed to find a way to eat more. So, being so strongly food motivated, this little 4-year-old girl, while I was watching her, looked up for the first time, made eye contact with me, pointed with her little hand for the first time, and said her first word, bear. And as I was telling my therapist this story, I just burst into tears. Every single time I talk about it, I can't help but cry. And it's so strange because I have such a hard time crying about sad things. But this one happy thing that was so hopeful makes me cry every time. It might be difficult to explain if you've never worked with children who have autism, because it's hard to understand how big a difference early intervention and speech therapy can make for these children. Sometimes without that sort of early intervention, they can go their entire lives never learning how to speak, sometimes never learning how to write. They end up trapped in their own heads, unable to communicate with the outside world. And so seeing Maddie learn how to speak at this very important young age meant so many good things for her future, meant that she could find ways to be independent as an adult. So as I was explaining this to my therapist, as I was describing this very happy, positive memory, I was just in tears. And I realized that it was the first time I'd cried in months. that I'd been so overwhelmed by so many sad, scary feelings. But this one happy memory was able to finally help me let things out, was able to help me regulate in this way. And this is a very common experience among a lot of people. Sometimes we cry not because we're sad, but because we're happy. But what is the biological mechanism behind this? Why do we do this? Well, according to neuroscience, we cry not just because we're sad, but rather crying is our body's way of trying to come back to a baseline after we've experienced a very strong, intense emotion, like intense sadness, or anger, or happiness, or excitement. When we cry, our endocrine system releases hormones like prolactin that attempt to calm us down and return us to that normal baseline. This is part of why not everybody cries as easily or as often as everybody else, because we all have unique bodies with different physiology and chemical makeups. For example, cisgender women typically produce more prolactin on average than cisgender men. And cisgender men, on average, have higher levels of testosterone, which can inhibit prolactin. This is important to understand because it means that when certain people say they're unable to cry or they never cry, it is not always for the same reasons that I am unable to cry. It's not always psychological, but sometimes it's a physical hormonal imbalance or a physical hormonal difference. So crying is different for everyone, and some people are not able to be taught how to cry. Because of this, some people need to learn alternative ways of releasing strong emotions and returning to a stable emotional baseline. Because I struggle so much to cry very often for psychological reasons, I end up having to use a lot of these techniques myself. So here are 6 different ways that I like to calm myself down when I'm struggling to cry. 1. Journaling. Part of how I became so experienced as a writer was because I journal so frequently about my own thoughts and feelings. If I'm feeling overwhelmed by something, sometimes it helps for me to write it down in sort of a stream of consciousness, just let everything out on the page. And as I write more and more, I began to narrow down these intense feelings and overwhelming thoughts and sort of unravel them on the page until I find clarity. 2, deep breathing exercises. So one of my favorite things to do when I'm overwhelmed emotionally is called the square breathing exercise. So either picture in your mind with your eyes closed, or you can draw it with your eyes open with a finger, a square. So first you go up for 4 counts by breathing in, and then you hold for 4 counts across, and then you breathe out for 4 counts down, and then you hold for another 4 counts across, and so the combination of the focus required to think about these multiple tasks you're doing at once and forcing your breathing to slow and steady to an even pace is a great way to calm down in a hurry. Walking is a great way to calm down if you're feeling emotionally dysregulated, because being outside in nature, having fresh air, sunlight, plants, all of that signals to your body that all is well in the world and it's safe to relax. Gentle exercise also plays an important role in this one because when our bodies are moving, they generate endorphins, which also help to calm and regulate our nervous system. 4. Art. You may have noticed that I like to draw. See the 2 drawing tutorials I've made so far. Drawing is a great activity for resting your nervous system because it requires focus and motion as well as giving you a creative outlet for your emotions. Music, dance, knitting, pretty much any creative outlet, including writing, can be a great way to relax. 5. Distraction. This isn't necessarily a good long-term solution for when you're feeling emotionally overwhelmed, but sometimes it can help a lot in the moment. If something really stressful happens and you just need to get away from those feelings for a second, you can walk into another room, you can play a video game, you can watch a favorite TV show, a movie, something that just immediately calms you down until you're able to get to a point where you can do something else more active to help with your emotional regulation. And finally, number 6, mindfulness activities. While other distracting activities are meant to take you out of reality, mindfulness is very useful because it helps you keep tethered to your reality. This makes it better for a long-term solution after you've distracted yourself or instead of distractions. Examples of mindfulness include maybe making a cup of hot tea and really focusing on that cup. Maybe cup it in your hands, hold it for a moment, and see how warm it is. Really pay attention when you're drinking the tea, how it makes you feel inside. And this is a way of resetting your nervous system, but bringing it back to reality. So you may mindfully observe a small object in your hand. Like I like to keep these little rocks with me and sort of hold them in my hand and play with them a little, feel how cool it is, look how shiny the texture, something like that. I think at some point in the future, I'm going to make a bunch of mindfulness activity short reels for Instagram because I think that's a great medium for it. So at this point in the video, I feel like I've gone over a lot of different information, and I'd like to do a little recap of some of the things we've talked about. It's okay to cry. Some people, however, struggle to cry, either for psychological reasons, environmental reasons, or even physiological reasons. And it's important that we appreciate their unique skill set and abilities without judgment. There are alternatives that we can use to help us emotionally regulate if we're unable to cry. These alternatives include journaling, art, mindfulness activities, and distractions. Crying is the body's way of naturally trying to reset the nervous system after a strong emotion, which could be happy, sad, anxious, or something else, has made us feel unstable. Everyone is different, and therefore we all have different needs. But if we continue to talk about these things, if we continue to accept each other's differences, if we be patient and caring and loving, we can find ways to meet everyone's unique emotional needs. Whether that means giving yourself permission to cry, or whether that means using a mindful coping skill, your emotions are valid, and it's okay to be you. So as always, take care, y'all, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one.